My cheating wife wants to come back after leaving me for a rich man 5 years ago. My name's Mark, and I'm 34 years old. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you that I had the perfect life. A good job, a nice house, and most importantly, a beautiful wife, Sophia, whom I loved more than anything. We had been married for 6 years, and during that time, I truly believed we were happy. We had our problems like any couple, but nothing that I thought could break us. Sophia and I met when we were both 27. She had this energy about her, this effortless charm that drew people in. I was no exception. We fell in love fast, and within a year, we were married. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family, but to me it felt like the beginning of something perfect. I was ready to build a future with her. Travel, kids, everything. For the first few years our marriage was strong. We worked hard, saved up to buy a house, and spent our weekends together, dreaming about what our future would look like. Sophia was my best friend. We laughed a lot, shared everything, and I felt lucky to have her by my side. I loved how we supported each other through the tough times, and how we celebrated even the small victories. But over time, things began to change. At first, it was subtle. Sophia started spending more time on her phone, texting late into the night. When I asked her about it, she would just smile and say it was work, or a friend from her old job catching up. I trusted her, so I didn't think much of it. Everyone needs their space, right? We were married after all. What did I have to worry about? Then she began going out more. Dinners, drinks with friends, sometimes without telling me until the last minute. I didn't mind at first. I figured she needed time to relax. But then, those nights became more frequent. She'd come home late, often after I had already gone to bed, and the next morning, she'd be distant, distracted. I tried to talk to her about it once. I asked if everything was okay, if she was stressed about something. She shrugged it off, saying it was just work, and that I didn't need to worry. But there was something in her eyes. A distance that hadn't been there before. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't push it. I didn't want to be the jealous, paranoid husband. I loved her, and I believed that love would be enough. As more time passed, those little things started piling up. She wasn't as affectionate as she used to be. We used to have these deep talks late at night about our plans, our dreams for the future. Now we barely talked at all. Our bedroom grew colder. The passion we once had seemed to vanish overnight. I told myself it was just a rough patch, something every couple goes through. We'd bounce back. We always did. But then, I started noticing the lies. One night, she said she was meeting up with a friend for dinner. I didn't think twice about it until I happened to check her phone later that night. She had left it on the kitchen counter, and a message popped up. It was from someone I didn't recognize, a man named Richard. The text was casual, but there was something about it that made my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you again." My mind raced. Who was this guy? Why was he texting my wife? I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a misunderstanding. Maybe he was just a friend, someone from work. But the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. Why hadn't she mentioned him before? Why was she hiding this from me? I didn't say anything that night, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. I watched her more carefully. How she was always glued to her phone, how she'd disappear into another room to take calls, how she seemed more and more distant. I began to realize that our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Then, the moment of truth came. One afternoon, I came home early from work. I wasn't expecting anything unusual, just a normal day. But when I walked into the house, I found Sophia in the living room, sitting on the couch with her phone in hand. She didn't hear me come in. I watched as she typed something quickly and smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. Curious, and with my heart racing, I stepped closer. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed me. She looked up, startled, and quickly put her phone down. "Oh, just a friend," she said, her tone light, too light. But I could see the panic in her eyes. I didn't believe her. Something in me snapped, and I pressed her. "What's going on, Sophia? You've been distant for months. Who's Richard?" Her face went pale. She stammered, trying to come up with an explanation, but I already knew the truth. I could see it in her eyes, the guilt, the fear. She had been lying to me all along. Finally, she admitted it. Richard was someone she had met through work. They had been talking for months, meeting up behind my back. She didn't say the word, but I knew what it meant. She had been having an affair. In that moment, my entire world collapsed. I couldn't believe it. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Everything we had shared, everything we had built together, was a lie. I stood there, numb, as she tried to explain herself, but her words didn't matter anymore. Nothing she could say would ever make this right. I turned and walked out of the house, leaving behind the life I thought I knew. I remember the day I discovered Sophia's betrayal as if it were yesterday. It was a sunny afternoon when I walked in on her, my heart filled with hope that maybe we could talk things out. But the truth hit me like a wave, drowning any chance of that hope. As she confessed to her affair with Richard, every word she spoke shattered my world into pieces. I stood there, stunned and numb. My mind raced with questions. How could she do this to me? How could she lie for so long? I had trusted her with my heart, and she had given it away to another man. I felt like a fool. The life we had built together, the love we shared, was crumbling right in front of my eyes. Sophia didn't seem to grasp the depth of my pain. She sat there, her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't find any sympathy for her. All I could feel was anger and betrayal. She tried to explain, saying that she felt lonely and unappreciated. But that was no excuse for what she had done. It hurt more to hear her say that she was unhappy. I thought we were in this together, that we would face our problems side by side. When she finally said the words, "I don't love you anymore, Mark," it felt like a knife in my chest. I had spent years building a life for us, believing we were partners in everything. To hear her say she had found someone better, a wealthy businessman who could give her everything I could not, made me feel worthless. I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her see how much this hurt, but instead, I just felt empty. After that day, everything changed. Sophia moved out quickly. She didn't want to fight or discuss it any longer. She packed her bags and left, walking out the door without looking back. I stood in the doorway, watching her go, feeling like a part of me was being ripped away. I wanted to call her back, to ask her to stay, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made her choice. The days that followed were a blur. I felt like I was in a fog, moving through life without really living it. I tried to go to work, but I couldn't focus. My mind was always on her, on the memories of us, laughing together, planning for the future, dreaming of our life. Now, it all felt so meaningless. My colleagues noticed something was off. They asked if I was okay, but I just shrugged it off, saying I was tired. I didn't want to burden anyone with my pain. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of her. The couch where we watched movies together felt too big and empty. The kitchen was silent, missing the sound of her laughter. I avoided places we used to go, afraid of what I might feel if I saw someone else enjoying those moments. I fell into a deep depression. I stopped taking care of myself. I neglected my work and my friends. I spent countless nights lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship in my mind. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind to her unhappiness? The pain was all-consuming. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of despair, unable to reach the surface. I would cry for hours, letting the tears flow freely, hoping that somehow I would find relief. But it never came. I felt lost, like a ship without a compass, drifting aimlessly. One night I was lying in bed, the darkness wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. My phone buzzed beside me, breaking the silence. It was a message from a friend, checking in on me. I stared at the screen, hesitating to respond. I knew I should reach out, but the thought of explaining everything made my chest tighten. I didn't want to talk about Sophia, about the pain I felt. Instead, I turned off my phone and lay back, allowing the darkness to engulf me again. I had lost the one person who meant the world to me. I had loved her so deeply, and now that love felt like a wound that refused to heal. I started to think that maybe I would never be happy again. Days turned into weeks, and my sadness became a constant companion. I stopped going out, stopped seeing friends. They would invite me to gatherings, but I made excuses. I didn't want to be around happy couples, didn't want to see what I had lost. I felt like a shadow of my former self, wandering through life without purpose. It wasn't until one of my friends showed up unannounced that I began to face reality. He knocked on my door, insisting that I let him in. I tried to put on a brave face, but he could see through my facade. He looked at me with concern, his eyes searching for the Mark he used to know. "Man, you can't keep doing this," he said, his voice steady but filled with worry. "You need to talk about it. You need to get out of this funk." I wanted to yell at him, to tell him to leave me alone, but instead I just broke down. I sat on the floor, tears streaming down my face as I poured out my heart. I told him everything, about Sophia, about Richard, about the life I had lost. He listened quietly, offering comfort without judgment. After I finished, he suggested that I consider talking to a therapist. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to admit that I needed help, but deep down, I knew he was right. I couldn't keep living in this pain. Slowly, I began to take small steps. I forced myself to go for walks, to eat something other than junk food. I started to talk to friends again, even if it was just to sit in silence together. It wasn't easy, and some days felt heavier than others, but I was determined to keep moving forward. Sophia's betrayal had shattered my world, but I was beginning to understand that I couldn't let it define me. I had to find a way to heal, to rediscover who I was without her. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but I was ready to start that journey. Little did I know, life had more surprises waiting for me, and my story was far from over. The weeks after Sophia left were some of the hardest I had ever faced. I found myself in a pit of darkness, where every day felt like a struggle. I had lost my wife, my best friend, and I felt like I'd lost myself too. It was hard to find the motivation to get out of bed, let alone go to work or socialize with friends. My self-esteem had taken a massive hit, and I felt worthless. There were days when I couldn't bear to look in the mirror. The reflection staring back at me was a shadow of the man I once was. I used to be confident, full of dreams and plans for the future. Now I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life. I sat alone in my small apartment, scrolling through my phone, seeing pictures of Sophia and Richard together, smiling and happy. It made my heart ache, and I would often throw my phone across the room in anger. But there was something deep inside me that refused to stay down forever. I remembered my friend's words, how he encouraged me to talk about my feelings, to seek help. So one day, I finally decided to take his advice and reached out to a therapist. It was terrifying at first. I didn't know what to expect, but as soon as I walked into that small office, something shifted. Talking to someone about my pain felt like lifting a weight off my shoulders. I poured my heart out, sharing every detail about my marriage, the betrayal, and my struggles since then. My therapist listened patiently, guiding me through my emotions and helping me process my grief. She taught me that it was okay to feel hurt and angry, but I needed to find a way to move forward. Over time, I began to see a glimmer of hope. I started to set small goals for myself. I made a promise to get out of bed every morning, to shower, and to take care of myself. I began exercising again, which was something I had neglected. At first, it was hard. My body felt weak, but as I pushed myself, I felt my energy start to return. I found a sense of strength in the sweat and hard work, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into my job, dedicating every ounce of energy I had left. My boss noticed the change in me and began to give me more responsibilities. I started taking on projects that excited me, things I had always wanted to do but never had the confidence to tackle. My coworkers began to see a shift in my attitude too. I was no longer the man who moped around the office. I was focused and driven. It was during this time that I came up with an idea for a side business. I had always been passionate about technology, and I decided to create a small online store selling tech gadgets and accessories. I spent hours researching and planning, putting in the effort that I had once reserved for my marriage. Building this business became my lifeline. I registered my company, created a website, and started promoting my products on social media. I poured everything I had into it, time, energy, and passion. And slowly but surely it began to grow. I remember the first sale I made. It was a small victory, but it felt like winning the lottery. My hard work was paying off, and I began to regain my confidence. As my business grew, so did my self-esteem. I started to feel like I was becoming the man I had once been, maybe even a better version of myself. I learned to appreciate my own strength and resilience. I wasn't just a victim of my circumstances, I was a survivor. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual friends that Sophia's life with Richard was not what she had imagined. The glitzy lifestyle she had dreamed of quickly turned into a nightmare. Richard, the successful businessman, turned out to have a dark side. He was controlling and manipulative, and I began to hear stories of how he treated her poorly. Friends told me how he often belittled her, how he controlled her every move. It was hard to hear, but a part of me felt vindicated. I had once worried that she had found someone better, someone who could give her everything I couldn't. But the truth was becoming clearer. She had traded love and respect for wealth and luxury, and now she was suffering the consequences. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief knowing that I was free from that life. Sophia called me a few months later. I wasn't expecting it. I had almost forgotten about her as I focused on my new life. When I saw her name pop up on my phone, my heart raced. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should answer. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling, I need to talk to you." Hearing her voice brought back a flood of memories, good and bad. I could hear the pain in her words, and a part of me wanted to comfort her, to remind her that I once loved her. But I quickly pushed that feeling aside. I had worked too hard to rebuild my life to let her back in without thinking carefully. "What do you want, Sophia?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "I know I hurt you," she said, her voice shaky. "And I'm so sorry. I thought I could be happy with Richard, but it's not what I wanted. He's not who I thought he was." I felt a rush of emotions, anger, sadness, and a sense of closure. I wanted to tell her how much she had hurt me, how I had spent countless nights crying over her betrayal. But instead, I took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "I've moved on, Sophia. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, and I'm doing well now. I'm not the same man you left behind." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could sense her shock, her realization that I had found strength in the ruins of our relationship. "I never thought I would lose you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you left," I replied, feeling a mix of sadness and empowerment. After a moment, I continued, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Sophia. But I can't be part of your life anymore. I deserve better." As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had finally closed that chapter of my life, and I realized I was no longer the man who had been destroyed by her betrayal. I was stronger now, more resilient, and ready to embrace whatever the future had in store for me. With each passing day, I continued to build my business and my confidence. I surrounded myself with supportive friends, and slowly, the wounds of the past began to heal. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them head-on. From ruin, I had risen, and I was determined to make my life one that I could be proud of, one filled with purpose, passion, and new beginnings. I hadn't thought much about Sophia since our last conversation. I had my life to rebuild, and my business to focus on, but news about her began to trickle in. It started with whispers from friends, and then I stumbled upon some posts on social media. I saw photos of her looking lost and unhappy, and it made me feel a mix of emotions: pity, anger, and even a bit of satisfaction. Sophia had chosen Richard over me, believing that he could give her the luxurious life she desired. But it didn't take long for that illusion to shatter. I learned that Richard had not only been controlling, but was also facing his own business troubles. The lavish lifestyle she had enjoyed began to crumble, and Sophia was left trying to pick up the pieces. As I sat in my office one day, reviewing the latest sales figures, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend. "Have you heard? Sophia is really struggling," it read. "Richard kicked her out." I felt a wave of emotions rush over me. A part of me was curious about the details. I had often wondered how she was doing, but hearing that she had hit rock bottom sent chills down my spine. "What do you mean?" I quickly typed back. "She's living with different friends, but they can't support her forever. She's broke and alone," my friend replied. "I think she realizes she made a big mistake." Those words echoed in my mind. Big mistake. It was almost poetic justice. Sophia had left me for what she thought would be a better life, and now she was suffering the consequences. I couldn't deny that I felt a sense of vindication, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. Weeks passed, and I heard more about her downward spiral. Richard had stopped funding their lifestyle entirely. He blamed her for his problems, and would often lash out at her, belittling her at every turn. The lavish parties and fancy dinners were replaced by isolation and fear. One evening, I received a phone call from a mutual friend who had been in contact with Sophia. "Mark, I think you should reach out to her," he urged. "She really needs help. I don't think she's coping well at all." I hesitated. I had moved on, and I didn't want to open old wounds. But there was a part of me that felt a responsibility. I decided to visit one of her friends' houses where she was staying. When I arrived, I was struck by how different she looked. Her skin was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She seemed fragile, as if the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. "Mark," she said, surprise washing over her face. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you were struggling," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I wanted to see how you were." Her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the hurt in her expression. "It's been awful, Mark. Richard kicked me out, and I don't have anywhere to go. I thought I was making the right choice, but I see now how wrong I was." I stood there, wrestling with my emotions. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be okay. But another part of me wanted her to feel the pain I had endured. "You made your choice, Sophia. You thought you could have it all, but look at you now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked down, shame washing over her. "I know I messed up. I thought Richard would love me the way you did, but he's not who I thought he was. I was blind." "Blind?" I scoffed, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "You were willfully ignorant. You left me for him, thinking he would give you a better life. Now you're alone and broke. What did you expect?" "I didn't expect this," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't think he would turn on me like this." "Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to betray me," I snapped. "You have to figure this out on your own. I can't help you. I won't." Her face fell as the reality of my words sank in. "Mark, please. I never wanted this. I miss you. I made a terrible mistake." "Missing me won't change what you did," I replied, my heart hardening. "You chose a life without love, and now you're paying the price. You think I care about your struggles? You made your bed, now lie in it." "I know I hurt you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I'm scared. I don't know what to do." I felt a mix of emotions coursing through me: anger, pity, and even a bit of sadness. "You're an adult, Sophia. You need to find a way to stand on your own 2 feet. I'm not your safety net. I'm not going to rescue you." "I just thought you would want to help me," she said, her voice breaking. "Why would I help you?" I shot back. "You left me for him, thinking he was better than me, and now here you are, with nothing. I can't be the one to fix this for you." The silence that followed felt heavy. She looked at me, and I could see the desperation in her eyes. But I had worked too hard to rebuild my life. I refused to go back to being the man who would sacrifice my happiness for someone who had betrayed me. "I hope you figure it out, Sophia," I said finally, my voice steady. "But I can't be part of this. You made your choice, and now you have to deal with the consequences." As I turned to leave, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had stood my ground, and for the first time I felt powerful. I didn't owe her anything. I had built a new life, one where I could thrive and be happy. Walking out of that house, I could hear her sobs behind me, but I didn't look back. I had given her enough of my energy, and I needed to focus on my own future. I had come too far to let her pull me back into her chaos. The world around me felt brighter as I stepped outside. I had let go of the anger and hurt from our past. I had learned to prioritize my own happiness, and I was determined to keep moving forward. As I drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom. Sophia's fall from grace was a reminder of the strength I had found within myself. I would not be a part of her story anymore. I was writing my own. And I was ready to embrace the next chapter of my life, whatever it may hold. It had been months since I last saw Sophia, and I was finally at a place where I felt free from the shadows of my past. My life was flourishing, my business was thriving, and I had found a sense of peace I didn't think was possible after everything I had been through. I had learned that life goes on, and I was determined to embrace every moment of it. As I immersed myself in work, I found myself attending more industry events and networking functions. It was at one of these gatherings that I met Jessica. She was a supplier I had been working with for a while, but this was the first time we truly connected. Jessica had a warmth about her that drew me in. Her laughter was contagious, and her passion for her work was inspiring. We hit it off immediately, talking for hours as if we had known each other for years. It felt easy and natural, and I couldn't help but feel a spark between us. After that night, we began spending more time together. Our dates were filled with laughter and deep conversations. I found myself looking forward to seeing her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt alive again. She made me forget the pain of my past and reminded me of the joys that life had to offer. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship blossomed. Jessica was everything I had been searching for: kind, supportive, and understanding. She never brought up my past, and I appreciated that. Instead, we focused on building something new together. One evening, as we walked through a park, the sun setting in the distance, I felt a wave of happiness wash over me. I turned to her, my heart racing. "You know, I can really see a future with you," I said, feeling a sense of vulnerability I hadn't experienced in a long time. Her eyes lit up, and she smiled back at me. "Really? I feel the same way, Mark. I've never felt this way about anyone before." It was a moment that made everything I had gone through worthwhile. I had rebuilt my life, and now I was standing next to someone who saw me for who I was, not for who I had been. As our relationship deepened, I found myself thinking about marriage and starting a family. The thought excited me. I had always wanted to be a husband and a father, and Jessica felt like the perfect partner to embark on that journey with. One night, as we enjoyed a quiet dinner at my place, I broached the subject. "Have you ever thought about what your future looks like?" I asked casually, hoping to gauge her feelings. She looked thoughtful for a moment before replying, "I have. I definitely want to build a life with someone I love. I want a family one day." My heart raced at her words. "What if that someone is me?" I asked, feeling bold. Her eyes widened in surprise, and then she broke into a smile. "I'd love that, Mark. I really would." From that moment on, everything felt right. I started to picture a future filled with laughter, love, and little ones running around. I was no longer just living for myself. I wanted to create a family that would bring joy and meaning to my life. One day, as I was reflecting on everything that had changed in my life, I couldn't help but think about Sophia. I wondered if she had come to terms with her choices, if she had learned from her mistakes. I realized that I didn't feel anger anymore. Instead, I felt grateful for the lessons I had learned through the pain. People make choices every day. Sophia had chosen the wrong path, and I had chosen to rise above the hurt. It was a simple truth that had guided me. Everyone has to live with the choices they make, I thought. Sophia chose the life of luxury, but it had come at a great cost. She had lost the love and connection that truly mattered. A few months later, I decided to take the plunge. I wanted to propose to Jessica. I started planning a special evening, thinking about how to make it memorable. I envisioned a romantic dinner, followed by a walk under the stars. I wanted everything to be perfect, because I had never felt this way about anyone before. The day finally arrived, and I was both excited and nervous. I had picked out a beautiful ring that I hoped would symbolize the love we had built together. As the sun began to set, I set the table on my patio, adorned with candles and flowers. When Jessica arrived, her face lit up with surprise. "Wow, this looks amazing," she exclaimed, looking around in awe. I took her hand and led her to the table, where we enjoyed a lovely dinner filled with laughter and meaningful conversations. As the evening progressed, I felt my heart racing. Finally, as we finished our dessert, I stood up, took a deep breath, and looked into her eyes. "Jessica, I know we haven't been together long, but I can't imagine my life without you. You've brought so much happiness into my world, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity, but then a smile broke across her face, and her eyes filled with tears of joy. Yes, I will," she cried, throwing her arms around me. As I held her close, I felt a rush of relief and joy. In that moment, I knew I'd made the right choice. I was moving forward, embracing a future filled with love and happiness. I didn't need to look back anymore. I had everything I had ever wanted right in front of me. I had learned that life is about the choices we make. Sophia had chosen a life of luxury over love, and it had cost her dearly. I had chosen to rebuild my life and open my heart again, and it had brought me the happiness I had always dreamed of. As we stood together under the stars, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had taken. Every heartbreak had led me to this moment, and I was ready for whatever the future held. Together, Jessica and I would create a beautiful life, one filled with love, laughter, and new beginnings. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. See you next time.